Hello and welcome back to this Library of Ruina series. In this video, we'll be taking on the Index Proxies. This fight gives us one of the best combat pages in the game and a ton of other goodies, so let's get started. The Index is a 2-act 5v5 reception with the first act playing you against 5 Index proselytes. They have 99 HP, 62 stagger, and are blunt stagger injured, and have 3 passives. 2 of them are seen on the Index proselytes and are a nightmare. Skim Prescript gives them another card, and Grace of the Prescript gives them 2 power to random offensive type every scene. They also have Respiration, but that won't really affect your decisions. Their decks are singleton and contain 5 cards. To where the Prescript points we've seen before, and has 2 mediocre Pierce dice, and the first one inflicts a fragile. Due to how the AI works, it's likely that this will get 3 power total, so even a creek with 2 power boosters is likely to lose. Most of your 3-cost pages will still outroll it though. Execute, also from the original reception, rolls very high on 1, so mitigating it with something like Public Blockade or outrolling it with something like Emotional Turbulence will be best. Will of the Prescript is their last old card, and has 3 mediocre dice. Generally, most 2-cost value pages or 3-cost bombs will outroll it fairly effectively. Now, let's talk about their 2 new cards. Binding Chains replaced Undertake Prescript as the blunt option and has a mediocre blunt and a mediocre pierce. However, when you clash with it, your dice lose 1 power, and if you lose the blunt die, your next die loses 2 additional power. This page is fairly annoying to clash into due to the power reduction, but isn't very threatening, so it's the same deal as Execute. Mitigate it with a block on 1 and tank the pierce, or try to outroll it with your 3-cost bombs. The last page is Multi-Slash. This is their utility, so you don't need to worry about it too much. Similar to the original Index reception, these enemies all target the same librarian, but since they don't have speed, you'll have double their dice and can probably make short work of them. The second act is much more threatening. You'll be fighting 2 more Index proselytes that are pretty much the same as the first act except with speed, as well as Gloria, Hubert, and Esther. Gloria has 210 HP, 125 stagger resistance, is slash resistant, and has 4 passives. She has Shimmering, as is the right of all boss enemies, Grace of the Prescript, Breaking Pressure, which lowers the power of opponent's defensive dice when clashing into her, and Unlock Blade, shared with the other proxies. This passive does nothing until the user has played 6 unique combat pages in which they'll enter a Blade unlocked state, which boosts the power of all dice by 1. Interestingly, all of the Index Proxies' decks are lies, as their Shimmering passive cheats in pages that are outside of their deck. In Gloria's case, Scene 1, she gets Binding Chains and a new page Unlock, which is a 2-6 slash, but when it gets used, it exhausts and adds Unlock 2 to the user's hand, which rolls 2-6 slash 1-3 pierce, which exhausts and adds Unlock 3 to hands on use. Unlock 3 is a 3-7 slash 2-4 pierce that restores 1 light and draws 1 page, which makes it almost strictly better than multi-slash. Since it's a utility page, you shouldn't have any trouble clashing into any version of it. On the second scene, she gets Swift Trace, which has slightly worse rolls than Will of the Prescript and has a power null effect. Additionally, on hit, the offensive dice will do 5 damage. Most of your 3-cost bomb pages, as well as cards like Creek, will be able to outroll this page fairly consistently. She'll also get another instance of Unlock. Scene 3, Gloria will use Heavy Trace, which rolls 5-8, 4-8, and has the same power null effect as Swift Trace. The rolls are fairly respectable, barely beating out Creek since you're power nulled. It all comes down to the base average roll. It still loses to your 3-cost bombs or a 2-cost page with 2 dice on it though. She'll also get a multi-slash here. Scene 4, she'll get a multi-slash and one of Execute, Undertake Prescript, or Somber Procuration depending on what her power boost is. Somber Procuration is quite powerful. On its own, the rolls are pretty mediocre, but if you're running Singleton, the second die gets 4 power, which increases its roll average to higher than Creek's. Additionally, it has dice type consistency and better dice placement than Creek, so it's quite strong. You're probably going to end up tanking the Pierce on 2, so bringing a page with a block on 2 like Extract Fuel or a Golden Opportunity is great. Once she gets unlocked, this behavior will change, and she'll get Heavy Trace and will have Execute, Undertake Prescript, or Somber Procuration, which I'll now just be referring to as the Big 3. Additionally, once she gets her 3rd speed die, she'll get one of To Where the Prescript Points or Eliminate, which is a 3-cost with rolls just below Tailoring. However, if the page kills the target, all allies get 1 strength, and additionally, if the target is below 50% HP, the dice get 1 power. This page is pretty hard to consistently outroll, but since this is the second act, You'll probably have quite a few emotion levels, and so your emotional turbulences should be able to roll high enough to contend with it. Finally, on scene 4, she'll get her unique page added to her hand, which will be retained until used, then added back every few scenes. All of these pages require the blade unlock state to be used. In Gloria's case, this is Eradication, a 5-cost mass summation that has a single 12 to 23 roll that inflicts 1 feeble on hit. After facing down Greater Split Horizontal and Triumphing, you shouldn't have an issue with this one. Any 2-cost value or 3-cost bomb with 3 dice should handily beat this page. Now let's move on to Hubert. He has 195 HP, 35 stagger resistance, and is pierce injured. He has the same passives as Gloria, and his behavior is very similar. Scene 1 is Heavy Trace and Unlock, Scene 2 is Binding Chains in one of the big 3, Scene 3 is Unlock in one of the big 3, Scene 4 is Multi-Slash in one of the big 3, and when he's unlocked, he'll use Heavy Trace in one of the big 3. He also has the same 3-dice selection as Gloria, and the same unique page system. His unique page is Decapitation, a 4-cost ranged page that rolls 13 to 25 slash and inflicts 1 feeble and 8 bleed next scene if it hits. Unless you have a mass attack or Venus degraded pillar, this is most likely going to hit, so mitigating it is your best bet. The damage isn't too high, especially if it's hitting someone who's slash injured, so it's not too threatening. The last enemy is Esther, who has 200 HP, 145 stagger resistance, and is blunt injured. He has Shimmering, Grace of the Prescript, Unlocks Blade, and 1 new passive, Raging Torrent, which draws a page for every 4 unique combat pages used. I don't think this does anything since Esther has Shimmering, but it's also on the player version. Unlike Hubert and Gloria, Esther starts with 3 dice, and so that gives new Shimmering behavior. Scene 1 gives Swift Trace, Unlock, and Multi-Slash. Scene 2 gives Unlock, Binding Chains in one of the big 3. Scene 3 is one of the big 3, Swift Trace and Multi-Slash, and when he becomes Blade Unlocked, he'll instead get one of the big 3, Swift Trace and Heavy Trace. His unique page is added in the same way. Castigation is a 4-cost melee page that rolls 1 to 5. Additionally, it has a 2 to 7 pierce counter die. The gimmick of this page is that it lowers the power of the dice clashing into it by 12 and on hit will deal bonus damage and stagger damage equal to 7 times the unmodified roll. This page is fairly hard to outroll since it rolls like a 13 to 19, but pages like Discipline that power null itself or mass attacks will absolutely decimate this page. Other than that, the bonus damage and stagger damage goes to resistances, so your best bet is to just ignore it since even a block die won't do much. Generally, I like to kill the proselytes first while maximizing the emotion level of the other 3, but if you're struggling, I'd say that Hubert's unique page is the most threatening if you have mass attacks at Boris, and Esther's is the most threatening otherwise. Gloria's mass attack doesn't roll high enough to be a threat if you're cognizant of when she's gonna get Unlocked Blade. I also found that they usually get staggered around the time they get Unlocked Blade, so you might not even need to deal with them. The pages you get as rewards are quite good. Esther is a new addition to the Speed 3 crew, and Gloria and Hubert are both quite strong in their own right. The player version of Gloria ditches Breaking Pressure for Easygoing Breather, which reduces the light cost of a random page in hand by 1 at emotion level 2 and above, which is quite useful. This passive lets you skimp out on light regen, getting away with only 2 sources. For other pages, Unlock is a fairly situational page. Since it requires you to use 2 terrible pages before becoming good, it's definitely not a page you want to be using in a short reception where every die matters. But on long receptions or floor realizations, it's quite strong. Multi-Slash is like Unlock, except instead of needing to use bad pages to unlock its potential, you just need to build Singleton. Obviously, if you're Singleton, you'll put this card in every single one of your decks. Otherwise, avoid it since there's better page draw that can be found elsewhere. Binding Chains carries on the legacy of Undertake Prescript by being very underwhelming. It doesn't roll very high, and power boosting will almost always be better than power reduction since you deal more damage, so you can safely skip this one. Somber Procuration on the other hand is an absolute banger of a page. I sang Creek's praises for having high roll range and dice type consistency, and if you're in Singleton, Somber Procuration is a theoretically better version of it. The only downside compared to Creek is that it's not blunt, but we can't have it all. This is the turning point to where I transitioned my generic decks like Lowell from Blunt to Pierce in my first playthrough, but I think the best deck for them right now is Puppet Blockade, Extract Fuel, Multi-Slash, Somber Procuration, Emotional Turbulence, Repressed Flesh, Wolf the Prescript, their unique page in the case of Esther, Hubert, Gloria, Lowell, etc., and either something like Creek if you're going to be blunt focused, or something like Fleet Edge for Pierce. You'll notice that I didn't include Eliminate in there. The reason for that is that it doesn't roll high enough to be worth including. The power boost is nice and the strength on kill is great, but if you're triggering those effects, you're probably already winning and any page would have worked there. For attribution, Unlocked Blade is a singleton side great to Forever, triggering faster and affecting all dice instead of just defensive, but in multi-act receptions, you need to get Unlocked Blade again, so pick your poison. I would say Gloria's passive is the best between the 3 named pages to attribute because you typically have enough page draw between Will of the Prescript, Multi-Slash, and other cards like Repressed Flesh, but light can be on short supply in longer receptions and realizations. If, for some reason, you've decided that you don't want to run Multi-Slash in your singleton deck and that Will of the Prescript is going to be your only page draw card, then Esther's passive will help fill in the gaps. Hubert's passive is fairly generic and situational, and I'd prefer spending the extra passive point to get something like Fervor, so I would avoid it personally, but in terms of 3-cost passives, it's alright. In the next video, we'll be taking on R-corp and their brood. I'll see you soon, and as always, thank you for watching.